Welcome to Stay Fearless, the FSP podcast with all things baseball performance. I am your co-host and co-founder of Fearless Sports Performance, Joey Hanley.
And I'm your co-host and co-founder, Dr. Alex Acevedo, and welcome to another episode of the pod.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Stay Fearless, the Fearless Sports Performance podcast. Today we are joined by Jeremy Kennedy. Coach Kennedy played college baseball at Barton County Community College and Dallas Baptist University before beginning his coaching career as an assistant at Dallas Baptist, where he helped the program transition from NCAA Division II to Division I and coached 2016 MLB World Series MVP Ben Zobrist. He then spent 7 years at Northwood University in Texas, where he led his program to 3 conference titles, earning Coach of the Year honors in each of those seasons. He then spent 3 years at Keiser University and led Keiser to 41 seasons in each of his 3 years, being named the conference's Coach of the Year twice while claiming 3 conference championships and 1 NAIA World Series appearance. He is now the head coach at Loyola University New Orleans, one of the top NAIA baseball programs in the country. He led Loyola to a historic program turnaround when he arrived in 2020. He's an exceptional coach and person, and I was blessed to have played for him during my time at Loyola. Couldn't be more excited to have you on and share your insights and experiences with our listeners.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that intro. And yeah, you were a good one to have. You were a good one to have in the mix when we first arrived. So because you were hell bent on getting the thing turned around. So we had to have guys like you to partner with.
Yeah, it was a blast, and it was a phenomenal, couple of years to be a part of, and playing for you was a phenomenal experience. I still pull a lot from a lot of things that I learned from you, and the experiences we had together.
Yeah, good. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So kind of want to jump into you obviously have quite the track record of winning, and are incredible at creating a strong team culture. So and I was able to experience it firsthand during those years. And so let's talk about your approach to individual player development, collective team development, and creating a winning culture.
Okay, good. So I think those are kind of the pillars of what we try to do. And I believe that culture is the most important thing, followed very, very closely behind by talent acquisition, recruiting, and development. And it's kind of like a 3-legged stool. Like if you don't have one of those 3, the stool's not going to work. It's going to tip. And so we work really hard at that. I think if you have a lot of talent, but you have a terrible culture, you're going to eat yourself from the inside out. I think you see that in the sports world a lot, where you have very talented organizations or teams, and there's just too many internal problems, and they self-defeat. And so our goal is to go out and attract the right people and the most talented right people that we possibly can, and then do our best to focus on them as an individual and maximize their individual potential. It's one of our core principles is we really want to maximize individual potential. And we talk about that. It really is the individual. So it doesn't really matter where that person is on the spectrum, from trying to get on a bus for a road trip to playing baseball after college. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we've identified what their strengths and weaknesses are, and we put a good development plan in place for that person. And so we work hard to do that. We try to maximize whatever ability we have on the roster. We have to maximize it. And so we want to have a group of overachievers. And so that's what we go about trying to do.
Yeah. And so kind of on that topic, when it comes to that, like maximizing that potential, obviously in a team environment, it's interesting because there's only so much time that you can dedicate to each guy, and some of it kind of has to come from the individual and then the players themselves kind of working together for the betterment of each other. So how do you kind of go about maximizing your time as a coach, the players' time as players? Obviously, there's only so much time in the day, and you only get so many years with the guys to kind of develop and bring their potential out. So how do you kind of go about balancing that?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little different year to year based off of the help that I have from a coaching standpoint. And also based on who the leadership is within the program. One of the things that helped us get the program turned around so quickly was the guys that were already in the program. They were the right type of guys. They had high character, high work ethic, and we had some really talented guys as well. And so what we try to do is the way that we structure our practices, I think, plays into that, the individual development. So we kind of go back and forth between team practice and individual day. So for us in the fall, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're on the field, as you know. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, we go to our indoor, and where you're in a very small group with your position coach for an hour. And that is probably where we do the most development. I mean, this word's probably overused, but we try to create a lab environment where it's an opportunity to experiment, to obviously get your routine in, but try to figure out exactly what it is that each individual guy needs to do in order to maximize their strengths and weaknesses. And it can be difficult with a small coaching staff. This year we have a bigger one, which I'm excited about. And obviously having Coach Bruce back is a big piece to that puzzle of development. But if we have leadership on the team that has been through the program, we can lean on them a lot. They kind of know what the standard is, and kind of like with our hitters, for instance, they understand what we're trying to do, and they can help me help somebody else. That happens all the time. We had a big instance of that this year where one of our older guys, I just wasn't getting through to a younger guy. And I had tried a variety of ways to get him to understand what he was missing out on. And I couldn't get there. And so I brought over a older player that had already been through that process of literally the exact same type of swing changes that we were trying to get him to make. And it's like, take him. It was Aaron Davis was the guy that took him under his wing. I was like, Aaron, take him, and you know what we're trying to do. Like, maybe you can speak some wisdom into him in a way that I'm not doing it right now. And it did. He made a difference. And so I think utilizing that, I think having self-motivated people, our recruiting is important in not only attracting talented players, but self-motivated players. Earning respect is a huge piece to what we try to do. And having personal responsibility is our top two principles that we have. When we go through our list of principles, those are 1 and 2. And if you are focused on earning respect every day and you're handling your personal responsibilities, it's a lot easier for a coach to put a plan in place and have players take it and run with it. You can give 2 guys the exact same plan, and one guy takes ownership and one guy doesn't. Well, the one that takes ownership is going to have a lot of success. The one that doesn't is going to point fingers and find excuses. And most of that is how guys were raised, maybe high school programs that they were in that taught them those principles. And so we put that combination together. It's kind of worked out for us.
Yeah, totally. And I want to kind of unpack, glad you mentioned like the earning respect, because that was a huge theme of my time there. And I'm sure it's continued to be a theme, that earning respect. And so I kind of want to unpack that, because I know there's layers to that, right? It's earning respect from yourself, earning respect from your teammates, then going out and earning respect from your opponents. And so let's talk about that, and talk about that kind of culture of earning respect that you built.
Yeah. I think it is arguably the most important thing for a male is to have respect, have earned respect. And like you said, the first person that you have to earn it from is yourself. You've got to earn the right to go expect to earn it from other people. And if you can't look yourself in the mirror and know that you put in a solid day's work, then you have no reason to get upset about somebody disrespecting you. You haven't done the work yourself. And so in 2020, that was the first thing that we tried to do. It was like the program had been down for a while, and the guys had been accustomed to losing. And, that wasn't going to be what we were going to be about. But the first thing that we had to do was put systems in place where guys could start to earn some self-respect. And so once you do that, it's kind of like a wildfire. It just kind of starts to grow, and guys take pride in that. And so, yeah, that's what we started doing. And then after that, it's earning respect from your teammates. Once you can do it from yourself, you do that obviously through, your work ethic, your accountability, how you're handling yourself in preparation for the work that you're going to do, how you communicate with your teammates, how you handle success and failure, kind of all those things. And then once we've done it internally with ourselves and internally with our team, then it's time to go do it with the community and our opponents. And so that has never changed. That's what we will always try to do. It's the baseline for every opening meeting that we ever have, that any of my teams ever have. And that's never going to change. I think it's the most important thing. I saw a study a while back. It was a marriage counselor speaking about the difference between men and women, and they were saying that the number one thing that a woman can say positively in front of other people about their husband that just lights their husband up is that I really respect the person that my husband is. And I think that resonates in every single area of specifically male's life. And it's no different in a teammate and your opponent. Our goal when we are done with a game, win or lose, is that our opponent knows that they just played somebody that was formidable, and that they have that we have earned the respect from them. When we're going through the handshake line, you can see it. If you earned it or not. And so that's what we've been in the business of for the last 4 or 5 years here at Loyola. Is we're going to turn the program around and turn it into a perennial winner. But that's going to be a byproduct of us earning respect, first from ourselves every single day, from our teammates, and then from our opponents.
Yeah. And I think that theme is so important because you can feel it in the air when you're part of that kind of culture. Every day you go out to the field expecting to win, expecting to put a competitive play out there, and it totally changes. I remember my first few years at Loyola, we were going up against good teams, and you could just feel it, like there was no life, right? But when you have that self-respect, the respect of your teammates, and then you're going out to play to earn respect, I feel like you go out there, there's just so much more life there. And it doesn't, you're not looking at the mountain you have to climb. You're looking at, the opportunity to earn that respect and to win. And you see yourself as formidable, and it totally changes the game on a team standpoint and an individual standpoint.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Yep.
Yeah. And so, kind of pivot. You've been able to coach some really great players and great teams throughout your careers. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but what do you find are the most defining traits that make players great? And then what do you find are the most defining traits that make teams great?
Players, I think the best players that I've coached have been self-motivated. They've been able to be competitive in the moment. The term that we use is competitive spirit. They are able to stay composed and present in the moment so that they can execute whatever it is that they do well. Obviously, you have to have a work ethic and you have to have ability. Those are like standard. But I think the big separator from guys that are just talented and the guys that actually get it done between the lines is the ability to stay present, to be externally narrow focused on the task at hand, and to be able to perform their specific skill set when the pressure is highest. And the guys that do that the best and also have the most talent are your best players.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I remember I was talking to Alan not too long ago about, kind of some of the mindset shifts that he made in those years, and was talking a lot about you helped him find kind of that switch that he needed to make, where he stopped thinking so much about having to do too much, and it was just trusting himself, trusting the situation, trusting his teammates around him, and just being able to go out there and compete. And I feel like that's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, I think the biggest one of the biggest examples of somebody being present in the moment and executing their skill set was what you did in the regional tournament that we hosted. And for those who don't know, you came in a really impossible situation. I even said it when I brought you in, like, we put you in an impossible situation. Let's just be pitch to pitch, do what you do well, and see what happens. Like, you're probably not getting out of this situation. It's not going to happen. But let's see what happens. Let's just focus one pitch at a time. And it was miraculous. Like, you got out of it. And I don't know, I think it was 6 strikeouts in a row, if I recall.
Yeah,
Um,
five. I think it was
5.
five, but
Yeah, you
still
probably
pretty damn
remember it
good.
more than me. But and there was runners in scoring position. Like, it was late in the game. We were really in a terrible, terrible situation. And um, so I think, like, 2 years prior to that, if you had said you're going to be playing one of the best teams in the country at the NAIA level, Oklahoma City is arguably the best program, probably the second best program in the history of the NAIA behind Lewis and Clark. And um, and if we would have said that you were going to come in and do that, I said no chance. There's no chance. And the strides that you made in figuring out exactly who you are and who you aren't, because I would probably say you would admit that it took you a while to figure out that, like, to buy into exactly who you were. But once you were able to do that, and not worry about what you're not, and not worry about what somebody else is doing, just focus on your strengths, um, then you became incredibly reliable and were able to, what I would say is, overachieve and really come through in a massive, massive moment. So yeah, I think if you can so kudos to you, obviously. And
Thank you.
our goal is to get guys to think like that. Some guys get there, some guys don't. Some guys are already there when they show up. But guys like Ben Zobrist is probably the best player. I mean, the best player I ever coached. And at that point, I mean, he was barely younger than me when I was coaching him. And so it was a lot more of observing than actually doing anything with him. But um, he was able to do that at a ridiculously high level. He was very talented also, but he could stay in the moment and he would persevere, and he was incredibly competitively stubborn. Like, you just couldn't tell him no. And a lot of people tried. Like, he didn't get drafted out of high school. He didn't get drafted after his junior year of college. And a lot of people wouldn't draft him after his senior year of college. And but once he got going, I mean, he couldn't be stopped all the way to a World Series MVP. So yeah, I think the goal is to try to find those guys on the front end. But if you can't find them, then really, really try to get them to develop the mental edge, the mental difference, which is competitive spirit, which I think is being externally focused on the task at hand when the pressure is the highest. And it's so incredibly hard to do.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I feel like throughout my career, it was definitely like a constant learning because sometimes you feel like you figure it out and then you don't. And then it's like, it's an everyday, figuring out who you are as you evolve, how that fits into the moments that you're being placed in. And then how are you, staying focused? Because I can look back at my career and kind of see there were certain points early on that I was able to kind of have that competitive edge, and then I would kind of veer off the path and then find it again and veer off. And um, I feel like it's a constant learning. And so with that, like, what do you say for guys that are kind of like trying to find that they don't quite have it yet? What are the steps that guys can take to kind of create that, and how does culture fit into that and the guys around you?
I think the first thing that you have to do is be very open, to be very honest with yourself about who you are and who you aren't, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And I think a lot of times you need somebody to help you with that. And that's what I try to do. That's what our coaches try to do is, even if it means somebody gets their feelings hurt, then so be it. Like, we're gonna really try to be honest, and identify what our strengths and weaknesses are. Because if you don't know who you are, then you're just and you're trying to do something that you're not capable of. It's not going to happen. You're just a poser. Like, we have a saying, we have a no poser policy. You can't try to be something you're not. You just got to be yourself and try to be the best version of yourself. And if you can dial that in, then I think you have a chance to be able to be present in the moment. But if your energy is going towards, it's kind of like stiff arming the truth. If your energy is going towards stiff arming what the actual truth is, then you have no energy to focus on the task at hand. You're too worried about whatever everybody's thinking about you, or creating some image that is false. It's not real. And so, as far as culture goes, how does that impact that? I think the very open and honest individual meetings. I think the detox sessions that Coach Bruce does with the pitchers is a great, a resource for that, is a great tool to help, guys learn that. But I think you have to, what would be the word? You have to be vulnerable. And so you have to have a culture that promotes vulnerability. And that can be difficult for men, especially young guys who have insecurities, to get themselves to do. And so they have to trust you. They have to trust that you have their best interest at heart, genuinely, or it won't happen. Because we have to have open, honest conversations. And once guys allow themselves to be vulnerable and see that, oh, this is a tool for growth, it's not a way that I'm going to get destroyed. Because oftentimes they think, if I show my weaknesses, especially to a coach or my teammates, they're going to think less of me. And it's actually the opposite. It's a tool to earn respect. If you can show your vulnerability, if you can have some vulnerability and show your weaknesses, guys relate to that because everybody has them, whether you're willing to say them or not. Everybody's got them. And then once you can see and show it to everybody else, then everybody's in it together to help you get through it and get to the other side of it. If you have I don't know what it is, but let's say every time you have a 4-pitch walk, it turns into another walk and a hit by pitch, and you unravel. Well, if you admit that you have a problem, once it starts to unravel to the group, everybody's aware of it. You're no longer hiding it. You get some support from guys because they all go through their own issues. And I think it's a lot easier to then work on it. So I think vulnerability inside of your culture is big. I tell all the recruits, like, we don't have a culture where we puff our chest out and try to be something we're not. Like, if I see that, I'm going to do my best to tear it down quickly, whether it be through one-on-one conversations. And then if those aren't working, then we're going to start humbling people that do that, because it's just not productive in any way, shape, or form. You just can't grow if you're too worried about hiding your warts, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, and I always kind of use the analogy with guys is like you can't figure out where you're going until you know exactly where you are on the map. And once you can figure out where you are on the map, then you can start to see, okay, this is where I need to get, and this is how I'm going to get there, and developing that plan.
Yep,
And the
beautiful.
other thing that I kind of try to keep when I kind of talk about mindset with guys is like it's almost like two pieces for me that I find are very helpful is like understanding where you are, being fully honest with yourself and understanding exactly where you are in the map. Then on the other end of it is being almost unreasonable with your expectations for your potential, right? So like where you are and you're fully realistic with that, and understanding exactly where all your weaknesses are, and then developing a plan to, okay, my potential is unlimited and this is how I'm going to get there, and having almost unreasonable confidence in that. So not having the confidence, overconfidence in where you are, but having the confidence in where you can get. And I find that that's really helpful for guys to create that chip on your shoulder, that it doesn't, make them a poser, like you say.
Yep. I think it's perfect. Dead on. I think it's another one of our principles is being resilient. And so the guys that I've seen that have been able to do that, um, you being one of them, is just a resilience that is shocking. Where I'm expecting, a guy to come in and just say like, I can't do this anymore. I keep failing, and I just feel like I'm not getting where I want to get to. And they just keep doing it. Like that meeting never happens. They never come in and say that. They just every single day I'm like blown away by their ability to seemingly regroup, reevaluate, go again the next day. And I mean, I could give you a list of guys like that I've just seen over the years, and it's all different levels. Some of them it's just to get on the bus they have to do that, and some of them it's to get to play pro ball. And like I said earlier, it doesn't really matter where you're at on that spectrum. It's just it matters that you're doing that, and if you're doing that day after day after day after day after day, then the byproduct is going to be a tremendous amount of earned respect. And so, like an example again with your game when you came in, like there was nobody on the field that day that wasn't willing to do whatever they had to do behind you defensively. Like they were locked in. And the reason for that is because they had witnessed, various links based on how long they had been there, but years of you showing up day after day after day after day after day, relentlessly attacking your plan. And so they're willing to go to bat for that. They want to see that guy succeed. So yeah.
And I think that's so important in baseball, because baseball's such a sport of failure, especially hitters. I mean, it's such a hard game, and so if you don't have that resiliency to kind of show up every day and say, you know what, like I failed however many times, I'm not making steps forward, and have that resilience and almost like kind of unreasonable expectation to be like, all right, no, like keep plugging away. It makes such a big difference. And you know, I like to talk a lot about kind of the psychology between the hitter and pitcher duel, because baseball is such an interesting team sport, and that there's so many one-on-one battles. And I think that's a big part of it, right? Is like whoever's more comfortable. And when you're able to, get up on that mound or in that batter's box and just keep plugging away, to kind of take the words of David Goggins, is like you're taking their soul, right? It's like, doesn't matter how many times they beat you, if you keep getting up, eventually, it's hard to fight that guy. And so I feel like that's such a big part of baseball, is like if you have that resilience, it allows you to have that confidence that gives you that comfort to say, all right, like I have the upper hand here. And you essentially win more than half the battle there with that psychology. I always talk about, the guy who's going to win most of the time is the guy who's more comfortable, whether that be the hitter or the pitcher. And so, because, you talk to any guy, if they're uncomfortable out there, whether it's the hitter or the pitcher, it's so hard to win. But when you're feeling comfortable, it's like that's when you're in that zone and that kind of where nobody can kind of get to you and you're just locked in cruising. And you're in that kind of zone space.
Yep. And you can't be comfortable unless you know exactly who you are and you've earned respect from yourself for a period of time. It's not one day. It's not a few weeks. It's like that accumulates over time. And there's a inner peace that happens when you know that you not deserve it, but at least have earned the right to get it. And I think that creates the comfort that you're talking about, and obviously confidence. And if you're in the box or on the rubber and you know you haven't earned it, or you're trying to be somebody you're not, it's just not going to work out.
Mm-hmm. And you can't fake it. You either have it or you don't. You've either earned it or you haven't. And I think it, like you said, it's something that comes over time, of just plugging away every single day. But once you have that, it's totally game changing. And like that's how it is, right? Like it's every single day you're putting one day, one day at a time, one pitch at a time, one moment at a time. And I remember that outing coming to the mound. I remember the exact words you told me. And I still go back to it because it's bigger than baseball, right? But I remember you said, when you're in a shitstorm, there's only one way out of it. It's one pitch at a time. I'll never forget that. And that's both baseball, that's life, that's everything you go through, right? And when you're able to just take it one pitch at a time, one moment at a time, one brick at a time, it totally changes the way that you're able to go out there and compete. And it gives you the freedom to say, all right, like I've put all of these days together. I've put all of these, pitches together, these moments together, whatever. And it gives you the freedom to just go out there and immerse yourself in the moment and go compete and be successful, without the outside noise. And you can't fake that.
Yep. Agree 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. I have a terrible memory, so I remembered the gist of it, but that was good. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to remember that one.
It's a good one, man. That's definitely pivotal. And like coming after that, the things that I went through with my dad and my family and everything, there's a million, tidbits that you give every day that I feel like are bigger than baseball, but that one specifically, that really got me through a lot of the stuff I was kind of going through. And that's everything, right? That's life. That's, whether you're going through something hard, whether it's baseball, whether it's, for me, PT school over the last few years, it's like you take it one moment at a time and you can get through anything. But if you try to look at the whole picture and everything in front of you, it's going to seem insurmountable.
Yep. I agree 100%. It's good stuff.
One of the things that makes a culture great is when each player takes ownership of their own craft and the success of the whole group. Each player is working diligently on what they specifically need to work on, while also willing the betterment of each of his teammates. How important is that? And we've talked about it a good bit, but what are the, I guess the specific things that you put in place in your practices, mindset? I know we do a lot of those, we did, and I'm sure you still do, pre-practice. You we'll start it off with a quote or just a tidbit, something that you want to talk about that's bigger than baseball, about baseball, but also life. What are the things that you do to create that environment, help guys kind of build that?
Yep. Yeah, so we have a pre-practice meeting every day. And guys are journaling now. I don't think we did that when you were here, but I've kind of done it off and on throughout my coaching career and brought it back. And I actually had a former player that I was talking to one day, and he's a high school coach, but he's also a sports psychologist. And he told me that he still has his notebook from when he used to journal with us. And this was I don't know, this was 2010 or something like that. So it's been a while. And since he was playing for me, and it kind of hit me hard. He's like, that was one of the most pivotal things for me, was having that accountability with myself And he said, when I go back and reread it, it's like something that I'm going to hand down to my kids one day. And it was like, whoa, um, like that's very impactful forever. And so we brought that back a couple years ago. And so we've been doing that. So we meet, we go over, like you said, a topic, a quote, or a theme, or a mental game, or current event, whatever it is. Um, Guys make some notes on that, and then they set a goal for the day. So just one goal for the entire practice plan, and they review the goal from the previous day, and kind of grade themselves out on how they did on that, and either move on from it because it's mission accomplished, or not. We got to work on that some more. Um, and I think that goes a long ways towards the growth. One of the things that we did this year is this. I lead that in the fall, and we let the players lead it in the spring, and it was great. So we pulled a random number out of a hat, and whoever's jersey number that was had to present that day. So they had to have something prepared. They didn't know when they were going to get called on, and they present to the team, and same process. Team makes some notes. We got some great stuff out of that. Some stuff from unexpected guys, and so that was good. I think another thing that we did that I stole from Jordan Peterson that I really like is that we did this year is on our first meeting in our journal, our first team meeting, we wrote kind of like a heaven and hell situation, good and bad situation. So guys journaled for about 20 minutes on if they present throughout the entire year the worst version of themselves, what do things look like at the end of the year? And then they had to just let their imagination run, kind of list out some of the things that they know they have some bad habits in, or some temptation or whatever, and create a worst case scenario, and then flip it. And the next one, they go for 20 minutes on if they're the best version of themselves, and writing out what those type of decisions are on a daily basis. Where can they be at the end of the year? And so that's in the front of their notebook. And so every once in a while in our meeting, the task would be, hey, go back and review what you wrote on day one, and check in with yourself and see how you're doing. And I think what happens is you have a tremendous amount of personal accountability, because your old habits are going to creep in over time. And when you go back and you read that, you're like, oh crap, like this thing that I said if I'm doing is going to lead to this end result that I don't want. It gives you an opportunity to self-correct without anybody else being involved besides you and your notebook. And two, it builds some confidence. Like if you are holding yourself accountable to the positive things that you wrote down that you wanted to do, you've earned some respect. It's like a deposit of self-respect. And so I think those things have really helped us to do that collectively as a group, and obviously as individuals.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. I think it's so important, like that self-reflection, checking in on yourself. And I really like that, because a lot of people, will remember the kind of performance side of that, and that test retest with like metrics of performance and stuff. But when it comes to like, all right, where is my mind? Where are the habits that I'm building? All of that. I feel like that's so important that people kind of forget or put aside. Um, and that's huge. And I remember we kind of had a little bit of that with like the detox sessions and that kind of stuff. And I felt like that was unbelievably powerful in our development, because with little things that you miss along the way, that you could be working on, when you have those check-ins, it totally it allows you to catch those things from day one, and you're able to where people in other programs, or people that just aren't doing that, where they're missing these little things, it allows you to kind of gain a little bit of ground every day. And then you look back at the end of it, and it's like this massive amount progress that you've made that doesn't seem like much each step of the way. And kind of an example of that I'll give that I think was really powerful. So I got to spend the spring with the Cleveland Guardians at their spring training site. And There's a dude, his name's Will Dion. He's with AAA now with Columbus. And he's shorter than me. He's a lefty pitcher. And he's unbelievably talented and just beats the odds every time. I think he's won a couple years in a row. He was like AA pitcher of the year or something like that. Hoping he gets called up soon. He's actually a Louisiana guy.
Oh yeah, right.
And yeah, and I remember one day watching him. He comes in the training room with a notebook, and he's like writing in the notebook. And I asked him about it, and he was like, "Yeah, like, I've been journaling, kind of just helps me stay on task and whatever." And so it's really interesting, seeing a guy that outperforms everybody's expectations so much on such a high level, and seeing that he does something like that. I feel like that's so powerful because it's just a testament to like how much that works and how much that helps.
Yep, agree. I think another thing that I've heard from Jordan Peterson that I really like is aim lower, and I think it's picking the low hanging fruit. And I think on a daily basis, I think you should have your big goal. That's kind of like your North Star that you're working towards. But on a daily basis, it's like get the low hanging fruit. What can you do today that you can actually accomplish and knock that out of the park? And if you continue to do that day after day after day after day, you start to build those successes, and it's just a stair step. It's like a fraction of a percent better every single day. And the cumulative of that oftentimes exceeds your big lofty goal expectation. You're able to accomplish some things that you didn't even think of if you're able to, over an extended period of time, knock those things out. And I think the notebook, I just think it's the best tool there is for that. I mean, every single year when I get done and I self-evaluate and get done with the season, I think every single year that I've ever coached, the number one thing that I'm like, okay, I got to get better at is I have to communicate more. I have to communicate more. It's like impossible to communicate enough. You just can't do it. And I think that the notebook is, you asked earlier, how do you impact a team when there's just a few coaches and a lot of players? It's like, well, that notebook is a coach in itself. And I think the impact that thing can have on guys is profound in ways that I'll never know, because I tell them on the front end, like, I don't want to see it. And if I ever see anybody digging through somebody else's, it's going to be a major problem, because that thing needs to be between you, and you need to be just scary truthful with yourself. So yeah, I think it's an awesome thing.
Yeah,
I
I
feel like
think
an
that's
idiot that I haven't done that my entire career, because I've done it and then went away from it, and it's just such a mistake to not have guys doing that. Some guys do it better than others. Some guys buy into it, and you got to tell them, like, dude, you got to stop writing. We got to start practice at some point. I assume you would have been one of those guys. And there's other guys that it's like, they're like, kind of going through the motions, but um, that's with anything. The guys that dive into that and really want to use it as a tool, I think the impact's profound.
Yeah, I think that's huge because it allows you to kind of, and I think this is one of the things that makes teams great, and having experienced a little bit of like the culture that I know this builds to. But I felt like the guys that were great on a daily basis, they weren't just learning from what the coach was putting in place, what you were putting in place. It was like, all right, how can I learn from myself? How can I look outwardly at others, or whether that be social media, internet, whatever it is, and find ways to make myself better. Looking within, looking externally, and then having those conversations with your teammates where everybody's kind of working towards that collective, like, all right, how are we going to get each other better? And I felt like some of the greatest things that I was able to implement, and in my own career, and what I got to see other players do, is like, and hitting fungo every day, I felt like was really cool to kind of witness. That is like the great players, though, they're having those conversations with each other all the time. And one of the things I tried to kind of do, and every once in a while you'd see me talking to the hitters, or, if I was bungoing, sometimes I'd wander over to shortstop just to have some conversations with those guys. And just like, asking guys like, all right, what are you working on? What are you doing? How are those things working for you? Or like in my case, me and Alan Payton would talk all the time where I'd ask them like, all right, what are you seeing? And like, what looks good and what doesn't? And like, what are the strengths you're seeing? What are the weaknesses you're seeing? What can I eliminate? What can I add? And I felt like that getting a perspective from myself and then getting a perspective from the guys around me, I feel like that makes such a big difference in being able to put each of those days together and continuing progress instead of staying stagnant.
Yep, agree 100%. I think that's where the culture and if that's part of the culture, if there's vulnerability and there's team, to where guys are competing against each other, but they're helping each other. It's like being in a good quarterback room versus a bad one. Like, is the starter stiff arming the backup because he's worried about him, or is he mentoring him and helping him along? And then vice versa, is the backup doing everything he can to help promote the starter, and while also working on his game? I think having that mindset within your program is huge. I had a coach that used to tell us all the time, "You're the CEO of your own career," and I think it's true. If you're gonna rely on one person to give you the magic pill, it's never gonna happen. It's never gonna happen. Um, as a coach, I hope that I can provide things that help, but the guys that really get it done take ownership. And there may be, impact points along the way from a variety of people. Hopefully I'm one of them. But, it's way easier to pull the reins back on a guy than it is to get an unmotivated guy going. And so, when we get guys like yourself that were that, Alan Dennis obviously was that, Peyton Alexander on that team. There's a ton of guys that were that. It makes our job a lot easier. If I'm having to come along and say, hey, you need to eliminate some conversation, then that's a good thing. Like, it's a little too much. Okay, that's a great thing. We're trying to collaborate, figure out how to get better, versus everybody's looking out for themselves and not trying to help each other. So, yeah, CEO of your own career is a big thing.
Totally, totally. We'll end it with kind of one more question, and I guess this can be kind of broad, so we'll kind of bring it down to like, a few points. But how has your coaching philosophy evolved and changed over the years, and what are some of the things that you've learned, changed, shifted?
It's a good one. So, I think if I were to say one, like the biggest growth point in my career has been coming to the realization that people are people. Like, people are just people. Like, decisions that people make, you shouldn't take a poor decision and stick them in a box. Like, that's a bad decision, so that's a bad person. Or that guy's not motivated right now, so that's just who he is. Or, a million different things that people go through. I think when I was a young head coach, I was 26 when I was hired, and there's some good things to that, but there's also some bad things. Like, I was very, very confident in what I was about to go do when I was given the keys, and I had been in a really great program where I learned from really, really good people at DBU, like one of the best baseball programs in the country, hands down. And it has been forever. And so I was very confident. But I would say at that point, I thought if a guy wasn't doing what we thought they should do, like, there was a problem with that person. Like, and I think now, I see people a lot different. I think having kids was a huge, probably the most impactful part of that change for me. My two daughters are polar opposites, and I think I've learned that people are a little bit pre-programmed, probably a lot bit. Like their genetics pre-program them to act a certain way, think a certain way, and then their environment comes into play, how they were raised, where they were raised, like all the trauma or no trauma, like financial background, like all these different factors that play into why a person acts the way they do, or what motivates a person, what's important to a person. And so I think now I'm probably a lot more slow to react and quicker to ask questions. Where when I was younger, I still make that mistake, but when I was younger, I was quick to react and scold somebody or write them off or think they just don't get it. This person just doesn't get it. Where now I'm slower to make those decisions. You still get to that point with sometimes, like some guys just aren't interested in what we're trying to do at some point, and that's just the way it is. But I think as a leader, you can never get to know your people too much. And I'm more of an introvert, so that's a challenge for me. But the best way to go about that is to ask questions. If somebody's got a shit attitude one day, it's probably better to pull them aside and say, "Hey, man, what's going on? Like, is there something going on? Because you seem different. Like, I don't know what this behavior is. What is it? Why? What's going on?" Versus the initial, confrontation, physical punishment, whatever it may be. So I'm trying to get better at that. I think I've gotten a lot better at it, but it's a never ending. I think it's just like I come to grips with people are people. I'm one of those. So I have my own life circumstances that play into my own emotional place that I'm at on any certain day. And so I understand that and have to like really take account for that before every single day. When things are going great and I'm ready to roll, like that's awesome. But it's just like pitching. Like how many days of the year do you toe the rubber and you feel great? It's not that many. And I think a lot more times it comes down to how do you lead when you're got a million things on your plate and most of them nobody knows about. And so hopefully as I get older and hopefully get wiser and get more patient, just a better understanding of people are people and dealing with all sorts of things and trying to prod them a little bit more to give up some of that information so that I can have a better understanding of what makes guys tick and why and what they're going through.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's some really, really good insight. I think that, guys, I'm sure appreciate that because it's, yeah, people are people for sure. I think that's a great kind of great tidbit to leave off on. And I think we talked about some really good stuff and we should do this again and kind of continue the conversation for sure. So for all our listeners that are listening in, hopefully you're able to take these things and learn a lot from it and use it to get better in whatever you're doing and stay fearless.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Stay Fearless, the Fearless Sports Performance Podcast with all things baseball performance training. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, like, subscribe, comment, reach out to us, and keep the conversation going. You can check out our website at fearlesssportsperformance.weebly.com, and you can find us on Instagram at Fearless Sports Performance or on X at FearlessBSBL. Until next time, stay fearless.